Hi everyone, this is week 5, video 1 of only 3 short videos this week. And our topic is globalization. So let's start with a simple definition. A worldwide process of socioeconomic interdependence. Now there are hundreds of definitions for globalization out there in the scholarly literature. And I picked this one because it's simple and because it draws our attention to these two different elements. Socio-cultural factors and economic factors. But I look at a definition like this, and I'm a little skeptical about what's so new and interesting and important about globalization. Because in fact, human beings have been in a worldwide process of socioeconomic interdependence in all of recorded human history. Our archaeological evidence from the earliest periods of human life show that humans were sharing ideas for food, sharing technology, trading. They were moving material goods around the world through their trade networks. They were adapting each other's spiritual and religious practices through syncretism and hybridization. They were conquering each other. I mean, they have been, all human societies have been in this process for such a long time. And yet we talk about globalization like it's something new and important and interesting. Gettysburg College has a globalization studies department. So you may be thinking in response to that what's new and different about globalization is actually maybe that it's an accelerated worldwide process of socioeconomic interdependence. These things have always been happening, but now they're happening at such a rapid pace, such that our world is changing on a daily basis, and human society and relationships between societies are changing daily. There are a few things about globalization that I want to talk about that have been particularly interesting to anthropologists. The first term is time-space compression, which was coined by David Harvey, who is a historian and philosopher of modernity. And this is the idea that distance and time no longer appear to be major constraints on the organization of human activity. So you can think of lots of examples of this. The fact that you can get on a plane and be across the world in just a few hours, that you can log into a computer and have a real-time conversation with someone who lives across the world, that you can find out information instantaneously. So it's as if our world has gotten smaller. Time and space no longer really matter. They don't separate us like they used to. The second is time-space distanciation, coined by Anthony Giddens, another historian and philosopher of the modern age. And this is the idea that modern localities are settings for relations at a distance, stretched out across time and space. So, for example, I know lots of families in Morocco who live in a little village out in the middle of nowhere, but their social world is distanciated. So they have a son living in the United States. They have a daughter living in London. They have other family members who've migrated to Saudi Arabia as laborers. So they, in that little village in Morocco, have goods and ideas and clothes and money coming in from all over the world, and they can get on their phone or their computer and they can talk to their children who are all over the world. And because of time-space compression, because this distance between them has been sort of compressed into nothing, they can actually live their lives at a distance. They can spread their social relations, their economic relations, and all these other things out all over the world from wherever they are. Okay, so we have the compression and distanciation happening simultaneously, and that has changed our lives so much, changed the ways that humans can be in communication with each other and share lives with each other. The final term is about globalization and local culture, and it's one termed by Jonathan Enda and Renato Rosaldo, who are both cultural anthropologists. And this has to do with the lifting of cultural subjects and objects from fixed spatial locations and then their relocalization in new cultural settings. So this term is a very postmodern one, in the next video, we'll talk about postmodernism. The postmodern trend loves words with slashes and weird capitalizations and parentheses and all kinds of stuff. And this is meant to show that there's a process of territorialization going on. So cultural subjects and objects come from a territory, but then they can be deterritorialized. They can be lifted from those fixed spatial locations and then dropped onto a new territory and kind of re-territorialized or territorialized again. And this term is meant to show that. So let's look at the example of McDonald's in Beijing. You're reading this article, or you have hopefully already read it. It's a little bit outdated, and I had the opportunity to go to Beijing for a month a couple of years ago, and what I realized was that Beijing changes so drastically every 5 years that the situation of McDonald's that you're reading about in this article is no longer the case. The fast food scene has changed tremendously since then. So I just wanted to briefly show you some slides from that trip as they relate to this article. So first of all, now fast food is everywhere. Chinese fast food, Korean fast food, Japanese fast food, American fast food, French fast food. It's an international smorgasbord of fast food restaurants, and they're ubiquitous. There was a Subway at the Great Wall of China, much to my dismay. And fast food has different implications there. So for example, Pizza Hut is a very nice restaurant. It's an expensive restaurant where you might take a date if you really want to impress her. So I went to a Pizza Hut and was really curious about this sort of classiness of Pizza Hut. And so first of all, I looked at the menu, and the menu presents Pizza Hut as truly an international restaurant. So you can get fancy Italian coffees, or actually coffees from around the world, but lattes and cappuccinos and all that kind of stuff. Pizza Hut is fun and youthful. I mean, look at these pages from the menu. It's all about kids and young people, because those are the ones attracted to fast food for the most part, even today. You can get paella, which is a Spanish dish. You can get all kinds of different Asian dishes. You can get, I think this on the bottom right is some kind of like a chili cheese Tex-Mex kind of a thing. And 2 years ago, now we see this at McDonald's around the United States too, but 2 years ago you didn't really. And every McDonald's in Beijing a couple of years ago had the ordering on the screen. You pay with your cell phone. The Chinese kind of skipped landlines. They started with cell phones, and now they do everything on their cell phones. They pay bills, they interface with the government, and they order everything. So you order your food and you flash your cell phone up, and that's the end of it. Now, interestingly, China is really re-signifying a lot of these fast food restaurants. So this was one of the most interesting things to me. This is an ad at KFC for a monstrosity of a dish called a chizza. It's a pizza on top of a crust that's made out of fried chicken. It was the strangest thing I had ever eaten. Delicious, but horrifying. So advertising the chizza is the member of China's foremost, very famous androgynous pop band. So it's a boy band, like, kind of copying boy bands in the United States, but the boys are all girls who are sort of dressed in a masculine or androgynous way. And so this is one of those band members advertising the chizza, dressed up like Colonel Sanders. Now, Colonel Sanders has been kind of undergoing a makeover in the last few years because of the sort of connotations of the old South and, plantation slavery and all that kind of stuff. So Colonel Sanders has been getting a facelift. He's been re-signified, and now he's re-signified as an androgynous band member in China. That just blew my mind. So China's working on American icons and doing something very Chinese with them. But what's also ironic about this is that this boy band kind of idea is not inherently Chinese. It's China trying to be part of global culture and sort of step up to global trends. So it shows how globalization is acting on the local, how things are being deterritorialized, and so forth. And I also noticed that, Chinese fast food restaurants, like again, this restaurant, he's sort of building on the Colonel Sanders icon to give legitimacy to his Chinese fast food place, which is like a noodle shop. But then I also noticed that there is still traditional Chinese noodle making everywhere. Beijing is known for its noodles, so lots of restaurants have this showcase where you can watch a chef prepare the actual noodles, which are delicious. So fast food has not killed the traditional Chinese love of noodles in Beijing. Okay, so one final definition is cultural imperialism, very important for cultural anthropology and discussions of globalization. And it's defined as the rapid spread or advance of one culture at the expense of others, or its imposition on other cultures, which it modifies, replaces, or destroys, usually because of differential economic or political influence. The key parts of the definition are the differential economic political influence, which then allows one country to impose itself on others. So we're not talking here about, Sri Lanka imposing its culture on America through cultural imperialism. Only the countries with the greater economic and political influence can be culturally imperialistic. So anthropologists have thought a lot about the question of, does globalization equal cultural imperialism? Is it really about these more powerful countries, economically and politically, imposing themselves on other cultures, modifying them, replacing them, destroying them? And as you can see, this question gets to the one we've already mentioned, asking in the context of colonialism and post-colonialism, industrialization, modernization, and so forth. Is change productive or is change destructive? Is our emphasis on the exciting new cultural forms that come about, such as Colonel Sanders being re-signified as this boy band member, or is our emphasis on how globalization destroys aspects of culture? Such as replacing many Chinese noodle shops with KFC, Subway, Dairy Queen, and other fast food restaurants. So it's a question for you to consider that we'll talk more about in class on Thursday.